Mondays with Monsignor Pope, here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
Good morning and welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and does it just seem hopeless? Maybe there's a lot of despair going out there in the world, especially when it comes to court system and voting and everything of that nature. What are we supposed to do as Catholics? Well, we're going to talk just about that with Monsignor Charles Pope. Good morning, Monsignor.
Well, good morning.
Yes,
and
so
we hope the truth does matter. That's always at the heart of it, isn't it? This crazy season.
That is the key, and I mentioned just a little bit ago. It seems kind of like hopeless, almost, and especially what happened in the court system last week. And now it's like, well, what are we supposed? Does my vote count? Is it? Because I know actually a lot of Catholics out there who didn't vote the last time because they just didn't know. Like, I can't, in good conscience, vote for this person or that person. So, I guess what are we supposed to do as Catholics coming into this election period up soon?
Well, I think that, first of all, we do note that we do have a duty, not just a right, but a duty to contribute. This is from the Catechism 2239. There's a duty of citizens to contribute, along with civil authorities, to the good of society in a spirit of truth, justice, solidarity, and freedom. Now, the love and service of one's country follow from the duty of gratitude that belongs to the order of charity. And I would add the fourth commandment, right? Submission to legitimate authority is part of it, and service of the common good. And they require citizens to fulfill their roles in the life of the political community. It therefore makes it morally obligatory to pay taxes and exercise the right to vote and to defend one's country. Now, so we have a duty, whether we like it or not, to engage in the kind of a difficult, what's become a very difficult and irksome, project, namely the national conversation, to put it as broadly as possible. But I think that, we can talk about this. You can help guide the conversation. There's so much we could say, but I would say, Keith, that what we do at least have to start with that idea. We do have an obligation to be present in this national conversation. We can all get a little angry and cynical about where things have gone. I think it's bigger than the politics, though. Philosophically, and I might add theologically, what's happened in the last 50, 60 years is that we no longer have a kind of a common basis for rational conversation. We've pretty much kicked God and the Bible to the curb, and at the political level, we've even kicked many have kicked the Constitution to the curb. So we're living kind of in an antinomian, which means sort of anti-law. There's no real basis for anything. It's all just argument and opinion. We've kicked the Constitution, we've kicked the Bible, we've kicked God to the curb, and we're just left staring at each other. And in this tyranny of relativism, the one who seems to win the conversation is the one who is the loudest, has the most money, who's the most connected to the ruling elite and the media, and so on. And we're left sort of angry. But I think the deepest problem right now is there isn't really any common or shared way for us to have a conversation so that things move from the intellect to the will, and it's all about power and just clench the fist and win the day no matter the cost. And this is, I think, the bigger issue in our culture. And it all comes from saying God is irrelevant, and God's message. Whereas you have been saying truth matters. And so I'll just to set the conversation in that regard, I think all of us are outraged at just these raw power plays that are going on, and it can incite a lot of anger. There's some spiritual things I could say, but let me stop and let you guide the conversation.
Well, it's very interesting. You mentioned kind of a few things of what's happening. So you have the loudest voices that are out there. Either they have money or they have some connections, and it's interesting kind of to connect what we were just talking about being a Saint Joseph today. He wasn't very loud. He didn't have much money. And I don't think he was connected very well to, the powerful people. So, I mean, the vibe that I get, I want to be out there. I want to be vocal. I want to be louder because as Catholics, we've kind of maybe kind of taken a step back and being, well, I don't want to, stir the pot here, and put my own opinion out there, during this work conversation. How do we do both? I guess if there's a way to do both, where we can be more outspoken, but not,
Well, first of all, I think part of it is to recognize our role in life. Some of us have the role to be more out in the public than others. Keith, you landed this radio gig. You now have more obligations and responsibilities than you did before, or whatever.
True. Yeah.
I'm a priest, but other people are very involved in the political process, or members of the media. Here in Washington, I have a good number of people I know who are part of the media and or the the political group down the street. So there's varying levels of obligation. Then you've got other people who their main work is to have a family and to earn a living and raise up their kids well. So I think part of it is, first of all, discern what is my role? Is it to be out there very publicly and so on, or is it to be more quietly behind the scenes, doing things? Now, my own brother many, many years ago came to me. And he said, he was very frustrated then. And I said, well, John, it seems to me that the best thing for you to do right now is to get married as you have children, raise them up well, and set them loose. And 9 kids later, they're doing all right. They had 9 kids. And I think that's one level. Now, the other level then is we still have to remain informed voters and so on. But I'm going to aim now, because you mentioned St. Joseph, to those who aren't in the big levers of power, but they're in the quiet group that's just every day getting up, doing their work, that we have to say that for most of us, an awful lot of this stuff we're not going to be able to do a lot about personally. So I go to God sometimes as a priest, and I'm very frustrated, not just with the situation in the world, but, don't get me started, but about the situation in the church, where a lot of the same problems have set up. We're no longer talking. It's just about power and, I'm going to beat you, and at some game. And I go to God and I go, and all I get from God is Carlito. That's what God calls me. He calls me Carlito, little Charlie. He says, Carlito, I gave you a parish to run, all right? I've given you some gigs, to give talks and do the radio. Okay, do those things, do them well, and leave the rest to me. The rest of this stuff is above your pay grade. Everyone's going to answer to me one day, and I know what I'm doing. Things are not out of control from my point of view. I'm allowing some things, and I can draw good even out of great evil. I just want you to know I'm still working. Now, just stay in your lane, do what I ask you to do. And I think that's what St. Joseph did. We have not a word from his mouth other than we see what he did. He quietly did whatever God told him to do. Go to Egypt, come back, take Mary as your wife, and just that daily work that delivered us the Messiah. And so all I can say is that find, first of all, your own place in this whole mess. Be part of the conversation, but in a way that's, for most of us, it's going to be more hidden. It's going to be in our family, places where we really exercise influence. I think what happens to a lot of us is because of the big media is that we get all worked up because we're sitting there watching cable news, and we get angry and indignant, and we start yelling, getting arguments with each other. And I think in a certain sense, we're being played. Be upset, be angry, be fearful, be very afraid. And we all play the role, and there's not at the end of the day a lot we're going to do about most of that stuff. So watch a little, stay informed, but a little, not a lot. And be careful, too, not to imitate the tone of that conversation. I struggle a lot because like anybody else, I get feisty and angry. But at the end of the day, just even little things like people refer to the president, whoever the president is, Trump this or Biden that. It's President Biden. Whether you like it or not, it's President Biden. It was President Trump. It was President Obama. Show the respect of the office. Have a respectful conversation, but be firm and clear, but also sound like a Christian when you're talking rather than some angry, bitter, rabble rouser who's just out there shaking their fist at everything. So I'm sounding a little preachy, but I guess I am a preacher.
You're setting us back to one. We're starting our week off. This is perfect. And I guess from what I understand, because you mentioned the Catechism mentions moral obligations, and voting is just one of those moral obligations. Is it considered a sin to completely avoid and just say, I'm not going to vote?
Yeah, generally speaking, there might be a particular reason that a person feels so horrified by both candidates, but at the end of the day, sometimes we do have to pick the lesser of two evils. It's not always going to be, here's the virtuous candidate, he's a believer, and here's the one who's it's just not. It's not as easy sometimes. But I do think that, I would say almost always we have the obligation to vote, and sometimes it's going to be the lesser of two evils, and sometimes the candidates are much clearer. But please, for all of us, let's avoid the idea that any of these candidates are the Messiah. They are politicians, and they usually get to where they are by a long life of compromise, and they're going to let us down a lot. My father had a saying, Charlie, he says, people disappoint. Yeah. They do. Put not your trust in princes and mortal men whom there's no hope. Nevertheless, do the best you can, vote for the best one. It's not always going to be lovely and pretty and have a perfect solution. But at the end of the day, it's a mess like life. And get into the mess and try your best to minimize the mess, I guess, would be a little grouchy. I tend to be a little grouchy in the morning.
It's okay. Trust in Jesus.
But I think somewhere, that's kind of where we have to leave it. I don't, sometimes it's the lesser of two evils.
Well, I can't appreciate you enough, and I know all of our listeners are thanking you as well to help get us back to one and start the morning and feel less despair. I think about the end of the day, we can control. I love how you said, being part of our domestic church and really focusing on that, because that's where we have a lot of say. So before I end things here, Monsignor, would you mind giving us a quick blessing?
Pacta benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti descendat super vos et maneat semper. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Monsignor. It's always a pleasure to have you. And we can catch you on A Life Lived Joyfully weekdays at 4 p.m. here on the Guadalupe Radio Network. And make sure to watch last Friday's show with Monsignor. He talks about, does God harden human hearts? Just search GRN Online on YouTube and Rumble. But hey, that is the end of our first hour. My goodness, that went by incredibly fast. I hope you learned something. I sure did as well. But if you may have missed a lot of that segment, just know you can search us online, Morning Joy, Rumble, YouTube, X, all the good places. So make sure to follow us. But if this is us parting ways, my goodness, we hope to see you bright and early tomorrow. And hey, make it a joyful day. That's what we're all here for. Make it a joyful day on that pathway towards holiness. Otherwise, we'll see you right after this break on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
This has been Morning Joy, where truth matters, hosted by Keith Downey. Take some joy with you today. Visit grnonline.com/joy to listen again, share a segment, or answer the question of the day. That's grnonline.com/joy.